Morning, everybody. A very welcome to peopleHUB. My name is Victoria Brown. Just as a way of introduction, if you haven't been to peopleHUB before, this is our community for if you manage people, whether that be HR director, health and safety, a business owner, anyone that has got people, problems, challenges, fantastic sorts of stories to tell. This is the place to be. So what we do is we meet on a monthly basis. We have a guest speaker normally. Today, I'm delighted that we have Matthew Shaw with us, who I'll tell you a little bit more about shortly. And then we also do have our online community as well, which I would welcome everybody to be able to join. So we're just trying to be supportive to one another, hopefully learn a little bit along the way, and help us on this journey. So we do have Matthew with us today. So Matthew, it's great to see you today. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you.
Matthew will be telling us all about his journey so far. He's the Managing Director of Raiys. I'm going to let him talk to you a little bit more about that later. It is an employee engagement platform. It's absolutely fantastic. I've had a tour of it myself. And he's also, Matthew, you have a story to tell, don't you, which you'll be able to share. Obviously, you were the COO before. You've built a business. You've got grown from strength to strength, so you understand the sorts of challenges and the importance of nurturing good talent. So what we are going to do before I do hand over to Matthew is we are going to just do sort of 10 minutes where we're going to sort of move into different rooms, just get to know the community a little bit better, and maybe share some stories around what you're finding at the moment about retaining talent. And then we'll come back into the main room and I'll hand over to Matthew and he can obviously talk us through his journey so far. So hi everybody, hope you enjoyed that session. I really do. I love going to those sessions just to get to see every time we've done it now, I meet someone else and we share stories. And I do hope that is working for you, because as mentioned before, we are trying to create and build this community. So it's not just about this event once a month. It is about obviously us sharing our stories and understanding what sort of we're doing and getting ideas from one another as well. So as I mentioned before, if you do have a question for Matthew, please do pop it in the comment box. We will have some time at the end, and we will also turn off the recording at that point as well. So if there's anything that obviously you don't want sort of to be recorded, totally understand that anonymity. So don't worry about that. Feel comfortable to be able to pop any question in there, and we will turn off that recording at that point in time. But also do pop your comments in there as well. Just let us know who you are, where you're from, as part of the community. So I'm going to hand over to Matthew now, because he's got slides and lots to share with us now. So you need me to shut up and hand over to him. So Matthew, if you'd obviously like to, are you sharing screens or have you got co-host?
I'm going to try and share my screen. Give me 2 seconds and let's see if this works.
Oh, look at that. Amazing.
Okay. So
over to you, Matthew.
All right. Thank you very much, Victoria. And nice to meet you all. So I take you can see the slides on the screen. Just give me a bit of a thumbs up. Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be with you today. I really appreciate you having me, for everyone dialing into the webinar. So I'm Matt, as Victoria's already mentioned, and I'm the Managing Director of Raiys. We're based in Warrington. So I'm here today to talk to you about nurturing your company's most valuable asset. And I'm not talking about the office coffee machine, although I'm sure that probably does get a few engines going on a Monday morning. I'm talking about, of course, your people. So to tell you a little bit about us, so we've got 2 primary functions. The first is that we're a business coaching app that offers on-demand executive coaching services via video calls with our vast network of experienced and, may I say, very lovely business coaches. And the other is we work with partners and offer a variety of white-labelled digital solutions, including our Wellbeing and EAP app. We've been around for about 6 or 7 years. We work with businesses employing approximately 750,000 people that have access to our app and have a large network of professionals that offer these one-to-one services in the areas of career development, leadership skills, confidence, presenting, lots and lots of different areas. I won't bore you too much more about our company. A little bit about myself. I'll only mention this because Victoria mentioned it before. Prior to working for Raiys, I joined a startup around about 10 years ago when there was just 4 or 5 people in the company. I joined as a marketing assistant. We weren't making very much money, but we had a good product. It was a consultancy company that worked in the payments industry. And over the course of about 8 or 9 years, the company just absolutely took off into the stratosphere, at least in our context. When I left a couple of years ago, I was a director of the business. My position had sort of risen a few different levels from marketing assistant all the way up to COO, which was my last position in the company. So I'd seen lots of change during that time. We grew from 4 people to employing about 160 people. We had offices in Atlanta, San Diego, Dusseldorf, Singapore, and where we were based in Manchester. So I learned a lot during that time, and I think that certainly helped me to then apply those learnings to the company that I'm at now. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we've seen the employee experience change over recent years. Now, our heritage comes from well-being. We started as a pure play well-being and EAP app, as I said, about 6 or 7 years ago, before I joined. And in the time since then, we've seen quite a big shift in employers looking for new ways to engage their people. The recruitment market is incredibly competitive, and perhaps what was attracted to candidates 3 or 4 years ago for companies that were looking to attract and retain talent. Now that a lot more companies have quite rightly taken a focus on employee well-being in the last couple of years, I think the businesses that were already quite forward-looking are seeing those other businesses catch up and asking themselves, what's next? What's going to attract the talent of 2023 and beyond? And so during that time since beginning, we transitioned ourselves to also cover the L&D space, and we've done that because we've now got a much better understanding of the underlying causes of low employee engagement and morale. So this is where we start to see the story unfold today. Now, in the research that we undertook, and everyone can request this from me after the webinar today, we found the #1 and #2 causes of low morale amongst employees was a lack of connection with their manager and their colleagues. And when we took a closer look into this, we found that these reasons circulated around manager compassion or lack of manager compassion, the general manager attitude, the manager having a lack of interest in the employee's development, and also things like team dynamics. And so if the main causes of low morale that we found were essentially the experience in the workplace related to how the individual works and works with others, then it made sense for us to look at ways to address those root causes rather than look to treat them after employees had perhaps already suffered from burnout. And I'll give you an example of how that looks. So if an employee is feeling a bit down and perhaps they're withdrawn from the business because they aren't progressing in their career, maybe in their morning stand-up every day, they're feeling that they've not got the confidence to speak up in those meetings. Perhaps they're struggling to manage those internal company politics. Maybe they got on the wrong side of their manager last month and they've not really sort of patched things up yet. Or maybe they don't feel that they're getting enough exposure to senior leaders within the business. We find that these are the things that tend to keep people up at night. These are the things that if you go home after work, this is what you talk to your partner about. And ultimately, these are the things or the causes that would lead someone to leave the business. So from our point of view, it's a lot more effective for a company to retain their talent by helping employees to improve those areas rather than, let's say, take everyone out bowling on a Friday night. And I've got nothing against bowling, by the way. I love bowling. We've gone bowling as a company before a couple of times, and it's great. But the point I'm making is that the employee experience has changed somewhat. And so if employees are finding that they're feeling down or withdrawn from the business due to some of those issues, no amount of these sort of new initiatives that you've seen over the past couple of years that companies are bringing in are really going to help solve that issue. And so ultimately that's what's led us to incorporate business coaching as part of our offering. And we found coaching to be one of the best preventative measures of low employee engagement and low morale that any employer can bring in. So in a nutshell, we now sit in this little sweet spot that encompasses well-being, employee benefits and L&D. So I thought one of my favorite things in life is internet memes. If you catch me sort of sitting at home on my phone, chances are I'm looking at these little funny pictures. So I'll start as a mean to go on by articulating my argument today with a series of these memes. Now, this is something that I'm sure all employers or HR managers can identify with if they've undertaken any form of employee feedback in the last 12 to 18 months. And essentially that question is, what is it employees want? Now, I'm sure that if you use LinkedIn, for example, you've probably seen countless articles about companies taking part in the 4-day work week. Maybe you've read about companies offering unlimited annual leave and what a double-edged sword that is, may I say. And I've seen companies offering daily Deliveroo vouchers. I'm sure we've all heard about that company in America that offers all of its employees 70K as a minimum basic salary. If you've not, I'm sure you're probably already on job sites looking for that company to see if they're recruiting right now. But the reality is that 99% of the rest of us have to live in the real world and essentially decide which employee initiatives and benefits that we're going to invest in that's going to give most value for your people without making your business go bankrupt. And I feel that LinkedIn, I love LinkedIn, it's a very, very powerful tool, but I feel that it does to employee benefits what Instagram does to holidays, and essentially just serves to make everyone else feel very, very jealous about what everyone else is doing. So my next meme of the day is all around the problem that I see about people initiatives that companies want to bring in is always going to be around participation. And so one thing I think this picture that I put together here highlights is a lot of companies, I feel, are bowing to pressure and jumping on the bandwagon with certain initiatives without necessarily a good understanding of the problem that they're looking to solve. And I'll give you a case in point. One of our clients who, before becoming one of our clients back in 2020, they were asked by their employees to purchase headspace for everyone, because at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of people who they weren't getting to see their friends and family, they were suffering with their mental health, and so they asked their company, could they do this? And so the company was very happy to invest in that, which they did. They purchased an annual license for everyone in the business, and it went down a storm. They got lots of good comments on LinkedIn about it. They got a couple of nice Glassdoor reviews, and generally speaking, employees were very appreciative that the business was looking to invest in their mental health. Now, when I spoke to the business owner about this, she said that after 3 months, they reviewed the usage of it and found that less than 10% of employees had actually downloaded the app. So although the company was paying for an annual subscription, 90% of the people weren't actually using it. And so ultimately, after the 12 months, they cancelled the subscription and just said to everyone, look, if you want to use this, we're very supportive of it, but we won't pay for it upfront, just expense it back and we'll do it that way. So I suppose what I'm trying to say there is that it can be very easy to get this wrong, and it can be very costly if you don't have a proper understanding of the problem that you're looking to solve. And it seems to be what people want, what people need are sometimes two different things. So there's two questions that we always ask businesses that are looking to engage with their workforce with new ideas to ask. And they are, the first question, does it encourage individual well-being? I think this is an obvious one. This is something that most businesses would, at their first port of call, look to address. There's lots of considerations around this because these initiatives are rarely suited to everyone. Perhaps exceptions to this are things like flexible working, which I don't think anyone would turn their noses up at. But certainly things like social event, fitness activities, mental health services are usually going to be more effective for some people, more useful for some people than others. But then the second question, which I don't think is always brought up in the context of well-being and engagement, is that around, does it encourage individual development? And the reason I say that is that, development is often seen as a very separate area, and it's slightly unsexy when the company is bringing the proposition to employees to say, hey, we're going to invest in your well-being, we're going to bring in some new initiatives, and the employees are asking, great, what is that? And the company says, we're going to send you away on a training course. Yay. You know what I mean? It doesn't quite get the same reaction as something around a well-being initiative where you say to people, let's bring in some pastries on a Tuesday or fruit on a Wednesday, or we're going to have, as I said, bowling on a Friday. That tends to get that immediate reaction. But these initiatives, tend to offer that enjoyment to employees for the duration of that initiative, as opposed to a long-term solution. And so if I move into the next slide, I'll talk to you a little bit about the employee experience matrix. And this is where you can begin to plot your various initiatives on this graph. So this is something that everyone can take away. And it's not something that I made up, but it's something that's very, very useful. Now, how I'm going to do this today is going to be a little bit basic. It's really only meant for illustrative purposes. But on the y-axis, the one going up to the top, this is where we plot how much of a positive impact on well-being a particular initiative has. And if you look at the axis going across, the x-axis, this is where we plot how much of a positive impact on development a particular initiative has. So if we start to throw some ideas on the board, so first we've got a beanbag, which is not just a beanbag, it's meant to represent a nicer working environment. So a decent impact on employees' well-being, not so much on development. I don't know why companies bring in beanbags. I find them the most uncomfortable thing to sit on in the world. A hammock I could get on board with, but I've never been a fan of a beanbag. So in terms of my subjective context, I would put it around about mid-level for well-being, not very high on development. The next one, so this is meant to represent social activities. So similar impact on well-being, slightly higher impact on development, because within these social activities, you tend to find that they encourage team engagement, better team dynamics, team working, etc. So a little bit higher on that score. A little bit higher on the well-being scale. This is when we have flexible working. So not a huge impact on development, but certainly very, very well received in terms of well-being. That tends to rate very highly. And as I said before, I don't think I've ever heard of an employee turning that benefit down. Obviously, it depends business by business. If you're a hospitality business, for example, it's not always possible to offer that type of benefit, which is why I'm sure you've all got lots of different initiatives that you're doing, and you could fill this graph 2 times over with lots of different things that you're doing. But it's a basic way of showing work-life balance and tend to score quite high on well-being, not too high on development. So if we look at these initiatives that do score a little bit higher on development, this is where we place something like a professional qualification. Now, if anyone has ever studied for a professional qualification during full-time work, they will tell you firsthand it does not have an immediate positive impact on well-being. Quite the opposite, actually, as I found out a few years ago. Over time, this does change, but again, when you're putting together your employee proposition, you tend to find that employees won't necessarily think that long term. They'll take the little quick wins, the little grabs. As I said about the pastries on a Tuesday, but as a HR manager or a company owner, you want to be thinking a little bit more strategic about this and to say, long term, what's going to encourage people to stay and engage in the company. So we've now come to the top right-hand corner. And if you weren't here at the start of the presentation and hear me say that how I run a business coaching app, I have to declare an interest. I run a business coaching app. So perhaps unsurprisingly, this is where I would place coaching in the top right-hand corner. And it has an equally strong impact on the employee's development and the employee's well-being. A lot of people think of coaching as just simply a managerial tactic to help someone to do their work. But it's a lot more than that. Coaching can be used to motivate people. It can be used to help people to plan towards their ultimate career ambitions by putting structured objectives in place and being held accountable to those objectives. It can help people with their perspective in the everyday challenges of working with people with different personalities. They can be used to give confidence to people in their own skills and performance. and even providing sounding boards, for new ideas and perhaps an opportunity to vent about work frustrations. So it really does straddle the two areas. So it's not a wellbeing initiative. It's not a development initiative. It very much sits in the middle. But ultimately, we feel that it can have a huge impact on things like engagement, productivity, morale, absenteeism, and ultimately retention. So once you've plotted where your initiatives sit on this matrix, we would then bring in this line to say, how are you looking long term? And this is where we then bring in the idea of long-term fulfillment. So I talked before about some of these initiatives being enjoyed by employees for the time that they're actually taking out these initiatives, but long-term, how are they going to benefit from them? And if I give you the example of, in 10 years' time, is someone going to look back at what they did in the company at the time and think about, the fruit basket they got on a Monday? They're probably not. They're going to look at how they developed as an individual during that time, with things like professional qualifications, with things like coaching, and ultimately to help them progress their careers. And so this is where we'd say that anything right at that line is really where companies want to be in terms of putting together their people engagement strategy. So now that we know that, how do we measure engagement? So if you work in HR and you've been sat in a board meeting, the very first time you get asked how your company is measuring engagement, that tends to be when you get your first heart attack. Because if that's something you've never actually looked at before, or perhaps you've heard about and kept telling yourself, I need to get onto that at some point, but you've never done anything formal around it, that's a scary position to be in, because you've got to cobble together something very, very quickly in front of your other board members to explain what your company is doing. But it's a very, very important area, as I'm sure that I don't need to explain to everyone on the call. But if you've never been asked that question before, then you're very, very lucky. It's a relatively simple thing to do in that there's lots of different areas that you can do to measure engagement. And those are the things that we see on the slide now. So taking the time to send out employee surveys and measuring them against previous ones. Doesn't matter whether you do it every 6 months, 12 months, or even something more focused, more frequently. The main point is that employees are getting the chance to air their opinions about their working environment for you to capture that, then measure it against previous performance. The obvious ones like attrition rate, and absentee rate, that's a very, very simple thing to measure. Looking at successful hires, so when you bring in someone to the company, how often does that person then last for 6, 12, 24 months, whatever it is that you want to measure. Online reviews, so Glassdoor, Fishbowl, lots of websites now that are looking to measure how satisfied an employee is at working for your company. Can be used for good and bad, but normally it's a very honest forum, so you'll learn a lot by your employees going to use those sites, reading those reviews. And then things like internal promotion rates, so how often are internal roles filled by internal people. And then finally, your employee net promoter score. So how likely would an employee be to recommend your company to, let's say, one of their friends? So a few different ways to measure engagement. So it doesn't need to be scary if it's something you've never done before. It just needs to have a plan of action put together. And this is something that you can take to the board meeting, put some statistics together for it, and present how well your company is faring. Right. So surprisingly, I'm not just here to talk about here today to talk about my company and what we do as our services. The interest that I had when I first spoke to Victoria about joining today was simply just to discuss, from my point of view, the most effective ways that a business can improve engagement, and really the importance of coaching to the employee experience. But there's lots of different ways that a company can onboard coaching and introduce it to their employees. So the first would be quite simply to upskill management in their own techniques. There's training courses out there that they could go on, and that would enable managers to use a coaching approach in their everyday interactions with their team. And it may well be that you want to step further than that and set up a mentor program within the business, whereby employees are having access and coaching relationships with other leaders within the team, not just their own managers. We found that to be quite effective in the past, and so that's one consideration. The second is to look to build a coaching team within the business, or even if that coaching team is just one person strong. But essentially their sole focus is in developing others. And it's quite distinct from an L&D role. L&D tends to be having a bit more of a broad remit than this, but a coach is simply there to fill up their time every day to work one-on-one with individuals to help them achieve and work towards their goals. And then the third is to work with a coaching partner like ourselves that can give people access to on-demand services from coaches. And the main benefit of working with a partner is simply that you get coaches from different backgrounds and lots of diverse experiences there. And so if you've got people in your business that have only ever worked in your business or your industry, but you feel that could benefit from experiences from outside of the industry, then that would be the benefits of working with coaches from those different areas. So coming to the end now, and I've come on to my final meme of the day. Peter Drucker, who is not pictured here, Peter Drucker, who's considered to be one of the founders of modern management theory, once said the now famous phrase that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what I've taken that to mean in this context is you can put together the best engagement plan on the planet, but if your culture or your company culture isn't aligned to encourage well-being and growth, it's going to fall at the first hurdle. And from my point of view, this stuff needs to come from the very top. Otherwise, negativity and indifference will trickle down through the company and will naturally end in low participation for whatever you planned to improve engagement. So you can have the best time communicating your new plans, but if there's a poor culture within the business and let's say the CEO gets up on the wrong side of the bed that day, it's going to be more damaging that new initiative gets trashed when other people were looking forward to it. It doesn't reflect well on anyone. So my advice there would be to get buy-in at the very top very soon, if there's not already that buy-in, and keep them very well communicated throughout to know what those plans are. They may have done something before that hasn't worked. They may be able to give you that advice, but you go and run off and do something and then you find out it wasn't really what your board had in mind, then you'll learn about that very, very soon. So that's it really. So as a recap, the points I wanted to for you to take home today. The first one would be to say, is the problem that you're solving actually the problem that you have? And so, thinking about doing some research behind some of the underlying causes if you're suffering from low engagement or low morale throughout the company. The second one is, does your company and its initiative address long-term fulfillment as opposed to short-term well-being, or lots of different ideas you can put together and plotting them on that graph that I showed you before. And then finally, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so making sure that your senior team are on board very, very soon when you're plotting your new engagement plan, and then that will have the best chance of success. And that's it. So if anyone wants to speak to me afterwards, my email's on the slides there. I don't know if yourself, Victoria, are going to send out the slides to everyone, but anything that's in there you can always speak to me about. And thank you.